Okay.
Well, welcome. We have Dave Bainbridge. He is the co-founder of the famous progressive Celtic rock band Iona, one of my favorite bands for sure. And Dave has released his own solo album on November 23rd, To the Far Away. Dave has toured the world and released 13 critically acclaimed albums. He is a talented multi-instrumental musician, and he's also released 3 solo albums: Veil of Gossamer 2004, Celestial Fire 2014, and Remembering in 2016. Thank you very much, David Bainbridge, for taking the time to answer these questions from Progressive Rock Central. I know you are on a busy schedule, so we'll jump right into it.
Absolutely. Yeah, good to see you, Mark. Great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. You chose some very prominent musicians to include in To the Far Away. Tell us about that selection process and trying to get everyone together either virtually or in person to perform on your latest solo album.
Yeah. I mean, every time I do an album, really, as far as the musicians I get on board, it's the key thing is the music and what is best for the music. I mean, I know loads of great musicians, but if the ones I chose for the album really felt like they would be the best to contribute to the overall sound that I had in my mind. But one of the things I wanted to do was that my phone?
I don't have anything on here.
Yeah, sorry, probably
No,
my
that's
phone.
okay.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to do on this album was to capture one of the key sounds that we had with Iona, that we kind of discovered in about 1991. Myself and Troy Donnelly, who plays the uilleann pipes, the Irish pipes and whistles. We were in Iona together. He was in the band for 15 years, although even before that, he contributed to all the albums. Initially as a session player. We became great friends, and when we did an album called The Book of Kells in 1991, we discovered this sound of him of playing melodies, but him playing them on the uilleann pipes and me doubling them on the electric guitar, and then him doubling them again on an instrument called the low whistle, which is a long kind of tin whistle but much bigger. And this was a glorious sound. We first used it on the track Matthew the Man on Book of Kells, and subsequently kind of developed on other recordings. And it seemed to be something fairly unique. So I really loved that sound, and I wanted Troy to be on this album. And Troy's really busy, often touring the world with Nightwish these days. But he was at home a lot more because of the pandemic, so he was able to do a lot of stuff on this album. And there are several times where we use this sound of the pipes and electric guitar unison kind of sound, which I really love, and that harks back to the Iona days. So that was one of the things I wanted to include on the album. As far as drums and violins, my good friend Frank Van Essen, also from Iona, we've played together for many years. I really wanted him to be involved because I love his playing on both instruments, and I think, well, with Troy and with Frank, something, whenever we play together and improvise together, something really magical happens. And I would say there's maybe 4 or 5 musicians that I've ever worked with that when we improvise together, it's just incredible, and amazing music happens. And Troy and Frank are 2 of those musicians. So one of the pieces on the album, Infinitude, Region of the Stars, started off as an improvisation that Frank and I recorded back in July 1918. Oops, not that long ago, 2018, when we were at Frank's studio. And when I was working on the album, it felt like that piece, which we hadn't previously released, should be on the album, and I subsequently arranged it for like full string section, and Frank did like multi-layered strings, and we got a great cellist from the Netherlands called Jonas Pap involved. Yeah, and as a drummer, Frank also plays in my band Celestial Fire, and I really felt that he could contribute a lot to this album, and he a lot of the time he's recording string arrangements like multi-layered strings for various projects, and so doesn't often get a chance to really let rip on drums these days. So he loved the music, and I think that there are some of the best drum performances I've ever heard from him on this album. So I'm hugely excited about that. The other kind of key element of the album and sound is John Poole's bass playing. I've been playing with John for about the last 4 years in the band Life Signs, and actually where I am at the moment is the leader John Young's house. We're currently on tour, and this is a day off. And John is one of the most incredible, intuitive musicians I've ever met, actually. Not just on bass, but just his general musicality and his ear for detail and his way of playing, which is so unusual and creative. So I thought he would be great to include on this album. The combination of him and Frank together is just awesome. A really amazing rhythm section. But of course, because it was all recorded during the pandemic, everyone's parts were recorded remotely. There was lots of to and froing, of course, but everything worked pretty well. Frank's got a great studio setup where he has his drums permanently set up, so he was able to get amazing drum sounds. And then there are two singers on the album, apart from me doing some backing vocals. My good friend Sally Minea, daughter of Kerry Minea, the keyboard player from Gentle Giant, whom a lot of progressive rock fans will know from the 70s. I've been working with Sally probably for about 6 or 7 years now, and we do a kind of duo thing. And she also sings in Celestial Fire, and like her dad, she's a multi-instrumentalist. So she was the obvious choice to sing the female vocal parts on this album. And as far as male vocals, a friend of Sally's actually, she recommended a guy called Ian Hornell, who she went to college with, and he currently sings with 10cc and Jeff Lynne's ELO. So he's done some big stuff, and he's an incredible singer-songwriter. Writes some amazing songs, and I felt his voice and his range. He's got quite a big range. Would be perfect for the material I was writing. So on the album, there are some songs that are just purely Sally, and others that are almost kind of duets really with Ian and Sally. So those are all the main people. I've got various people playing whistles and other violin parts as well. Martin Nolan, who preceded Troy in Iona. And my friends Nigel and Julie Cameron, who play whistles and flutes. And I think that's probably about it.
Very dynamic, and that's the wonderful thing about your album is the layers, and then going back and listening to the layers of music that fill the background. They're just you don't get tired of it. It's unbelievable.
Thanks, Mark. I think one of my early influences was the album Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield. When I heard that, I was maybe about 12 or 13 years old, and just getting into music, improvising and writing. And I think what's really struck me about that album was that one person could achieve so much multi-tracking things and playing various instruments. And when I heard that, I thought, oh, that's what I really want to do. I want to create music like this. I already played guitar and piano, so I really wanted to expand into other stringed instruments and multi-layered keyboards and that. I suppose since then, my approach to writing and recording has always been that kind of trying to create lots of layers and interesting textures with lots of different instruments. And I think it was maybe was it on Omadon or Hergus Ridge, one of Michael Field's albums, where I first heard uilleann pipes, the Irish pipes, and I just loved the sound of it. And since then, I wanted to include that in my music. And when I met Troy, who's like one of the best uilleann pipe players in the world, I was fortunate enough to be able to play with him and have him as an integral part of much of my music. So yeah, you can hear lots of folk influences and rock influences and progressive influences.
Well, okay. Aren't we all sea gazers? I know there are people that love the desert and never care to touch the sea, but most of us just love the sound of the waves and the feeling of connection the ocean brings. What are your favorite feelings of being by the sea?
Well, actually, I grew up in a town that was quite a long way from the sea. But I mean, I live in England, so actually the furthest point I think in England from the sea is only 70 miles. So when I was a child, we used to go on holiday to the seaside every year to a place called Scarborough, which is a Victorian seaside resort. But what's nice about the places in England and Scotland that are by the sea is often you'll have a castle as well. So you get the sea, but you also get like a sense of history. There's a really great castle at Scarborough, and then other places which I visited when I was young, Lindisfarne Island, which has a monastery that dates back actually the original monastery was like founded in 650 AD or something like that. And then dotted along the northeast coast, which is the region I came from, there are all these castles, Bamburgh Castle and Dunstanburgh Castle, many of which originally date back to like the 7th century or so. So you get this combination of history and the sea, and I think both of those things have influenced my music actually, particularly on this album, because it was written during the pandemic. I was supposed to be married to my fiancée Sharon back in March last year. She's from Baltimore, at the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. And I was actually on tour with Life Signs, and just before the end of the tour, the US closed its borders, and so I wasn't able to get over there for the next 8.5 months. So we were separated from each other for 8.5 months, except, fortunately we had Skype and Skyped every day. So the album was kind of my response to the pandemic, in that every day I was walking up I live on a country lane in a place called Lincolnshire, and there's beautiful scenery. So every day I got out and walked along this lane and took photographs and just came up with ideas as I was walking and running for music, inspired by the landscapes. But also then our separation got me thinking about various ideas to be able to interpret the feelings of separation in the music. The track Sea Gazers, which opens the album, when we finally did get back together, myself and Sharon, in November last year, we visited a place called Ocean City on the coast in Baltimore, and I took we were walking along the coast at dusk, and there was this fantastic scene of the sun going down and this amazing blue sky reflected in the water. So I took some photos, one of which ended up on the album cover. But about the same time last year, Sharon showed me this photo that she found of her gazing out to sea, several years ago, and it's taken from behind her, so you can see her from behind, and then just the sea. And I thought it would be great to layer that photo with the one from the current one from Ocean City. But when I saw the photo of Sharon, it got me thinking of this idea that maybe years and years ago, the person in the photo gazed out at sea and just for a moment felt that there was someone at the other side of the ocean longing for her.
Yeah.
So that was the idea behind the song, and it obviously took on much more significance because we were separated by 3,500 miles of ocean. So the idea of the song was that on the other side of the ocean there was a man with the same thoughts, simultaneously looking out across the Atlantic the other way. So the track opens actually with not just like a library music sound of the sea, but it was the sound of the sea that I recorded on my iPhone when I was doing a gig with the Straubs in North Wales at a festival. So it's actually the sound of the Atlantic Ocean looking out across towards the USA. So yeah, everything really tied together in that song, Sea Gazers.
All right. On A Girl in the Magical Sky, I found a connection between your girl and Led Zeppelin's The Lady Who Shines a White Light. What was your inspiration for the character in your song?
Well, again, a lot of the tracks on the album, as well as being inspired by this kind of theme of separation, then journey, and then my laptop's falling down.
It's okay.
Oh, hang on. Hello?
I'm right here.
Hello, John.
Only mean we're leaving in 15 minutes.
Oh.
The interview time.
Yeah.
And then we're going down to the local.
Okay, I'll have to join you in a bit, I think.
No, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Right. Oh, right. There's been a change of plan as far as our meal tonight.
Do you need to go earlier? Or?
Well, yeah, I'll hang on here. I can lock up and go down later, I think.
Well, I don't want to put you out.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We'll carry on and see how it goes. Right. Yeah. So as well as the general theme of separation, kind of journeying back together and being reunited, which kind of runs through the album. A lot of the tracks are inspired by photographs I took on my daily walks on the lane in Lincolnshire that I live. Girl in the Magical Sky was inspired by a photo when Sharon was here pre-pandemic, about a couple of years ago, my wife now. And we were just walking one summer's evening along the lane, and there was this unbelievable sky. I mean, it just looked like something from another planet. Incredible colors, ranging from kind of pinks to reds to grays and blues. So I took a photo. Sharon was walking down the lane in front of me, so I took this photo, and you can see her walking, and then on the right hand side you can see this sky, which was really magical. That was kind of the inspiration behind the music on that track. And then as far as the lyrics, I was collaborating with this amazing poet from Ireland called Lynn Caldwell, who's actually the wife of Martin Nolan, who was in Iona, who replaced Troy on pipes. And I'd seen some of Lynn's poems on a blog that she does, and thought I love the descriptive way that she writes. And when I was thinking about who I could get to collaborate with, because although I write lyrics, I'm mainly kind of come up with concepts and then like to collaborate lyrics. So I loved what she was writing and asked if she'd be interested in collaborating. So she came up with the poem that starts "Girl in the Magical Sky," and I kind of described the photo and everything, and she came up with the lyrics on that, which are just fabulous, really, very very evocative of the scene and everything. So there are several tracks like "Rain and Sun," which is an instrumental track on the album that again was inspired by a photograph I took while I was out walking one day, and on the left-hand side of this big field, because it's very flat where I live, so you can see the weather coming towards you from quite a distance.
Oh, wow.
And on the left-hand side, there was these sheets of rain, but on the right-hand side, the sun was shining through the clouds. So I took several photos of this and called them "Rain and Sun," and then tried to interpret that through their music.
I love the way you start "Clear Skies." It kind of reminded me some of the earlier Moody Blues albums. You obviously, have a love for classical music, but thank you very much, first of all, for bringing that back into progressive rock. And was that intentional, or because it was fantastic?
Yeah, well, I've always, when I first started piano lessons at the age of 8, that was purely classical, and then I studied classical music for a while and had a really great teacher for a few years who really introduced me to lots of composers that I'd never heard before. So I developed a real love of kind of French Impressionist music, and also English composers like Vaughan Williams, and there's a whole load from the early 20th century, George Butterworth and various others. But they kind of had this English sound, and when I think I absorbed kind of the harmonic language in my music, and I always had this idea that if I could incorporate kind of some of the emotional quality of this beautiful string music, but with combining it with rock music and folk influences, then maybe I could come up with something that was quite interesting. So the beginning of that, I think, has the influences of the composers like Ralph Vaughan Williams, or Rafe Vaughan Williams, rather. And E.J. Moran is another favorite. He wrote just amazing melodies and beautiful harmonies, and isn't very widely known, probably outside of England. I think there are some influences there that are kind of very, very English, which I try to incorporate into my music.
Okay. Well, you can't go any further without talking about Ghostlight. It is, for me, the best song on the album. It must have been inspired from a higher place.
There's a kind of a few different ideas behind this track. Originally, I was working on it with Sally probably about 3 years ago. We put a demo down. I had a small piece of music working that I worked on a travel guitar, 12-string travel guitar, and I came across some words from a poem from a 19th century poet called Arthur O'Shaughnessy, and the idea behind it was that the arts and musicians are actually much more important in society than kind of politicians and people in power will give credit for, which I think is true. I mean, you look at history. I mean, and the things you remember are often more to do with the arts than politicians. Excuse me. We came up with this tune. It was only a small section, which became the middle section of Ghostlight. And I did a demo with Sally, and she helped come up with some lyrics as well. Because I was thinking that was the original kind of idea of seeing this poem, and about the importance of music and in society. Then I had this idea that of a story that maybe by genetic kind of engineering, somehow people are kind of programmed not to respond to music and the arts, so there can be kind of more productive, scientifically based humans. But as a result of this, like theatres and museums and arts galleries close, and people's response to spiritual things ceases. So churches close and everything. And but then, in the story, people would rebel against this and rise up against it, because in the end they'd realize these were the things that are the most important things in life, the arts and our spiritual side. So that I was going to write that was going to be the theme for the song, and then obviously the pandemic hit, and it was weird really, because actually art galleries and museums and theatres all did close, although for a different reason. Churches closed because it wasn't safe to meet. So in an ironic way, that theme kind of carried on. Then I saw a post by my friend Chris Curran, who's the lighting designer for Steve Hackett, fantastic lighting guy, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And he just put one single picture in a paragraph that he'd written. And the picture was a light on a stage in a theatre. And he said, because over here in England, when a performance is finished in a theatre, the stage technicians always leave a light on. And the idea of it is, although the theatre is quiet and dark, there's this one ghost light, and it's symbolic of the return of the performances, usually the following day. And that took on more significance because theatres were closed in England for like 18 months or something. So I thought that idea of the ghost light was a really nice idea. That I know also I wanted to write something that was relevant to now, and in acknowledgement to all the people who were out of work behind the scenes, like lighting designers, carpenters who work on sets, and set designers, managers, and everyone. So part of the song is an acknowledgement of their worth, and because like soon after the pandemic hit here, the government were saying that people in the arts should retrain to do other jobs.
Oh my goodness. No.
Yeah, and I was thinking, they're missing something here, because the thing that people actually need in a time like this is to listen to music and to look at beautiful images of paintings and have their soul enriched. So this was also kind of a response to that. And then there's also a more spiritual dimension. I got to thinking, in a way, we're kind of like ghost lights or placeholders waiting for the return of the great light. For those who believe in Christianity, that it's obviously Jesus. So the idea of waiting for a great kind of savior was also part of the thinking behind that track, which is it took me a long time to explain. It's probably why there are so many lyrics in it as well.
No. I got that immediately when I heard it. So
Yeah.
message received. Thank you.
Oh, great. Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure
I
others will that know, that understand and believe.
yeah. Yeah. But it was a nice track to put together. I mean, I think it's more than 14 minutes long, so um, it took a lot of putting together. And in fact, it was the last track I mixed on the album. I did one mix and felt that it didn't really wasn't as dynamic as it could be. So at the last minute, I decided to remix the whole thing, and it came out pretty well, I think, in the end.
Very good. Very good. Who would you consider a cathedral thinker?
Oh, okay, right. So, well, that's one of the tracks on the album, Cathedral Thinkers. And I first heard that phrase on a BBC radio program where it was talking about people who created things of beauty in their lifetimes that they knew would never be finished by the end of their life. So originally it referred to the masons and other workers who built the great cathedrals in England and other countries, who'd be working because like a cathedral, some of the cathedrals we have in England are incredible and took more than 100 years to build. So I just thought that was an interesting idea. Mm-hmm. Of long-term thinking, really, and also that we need to kind of start thinking more long-term now as far as tackling some of the world's really big issues and problems like climate change. I mean, the problem we have is that we have like governments that are in power for 5 years and they promise everything, but then the government will change to a different party. You've got different ideas, and so everything is very short term. And the only way we're going to tackle these major problems is by coming together and having a vision that's beyond our own lifetimes. So that was thinking behind that. So yeah, I mean, people like Greta Thunberg, I think, probably is a cathedral thinker in terms of the environment. And it's difficult to tell. I mean, because like musicians who wrote music 200 years ago, like Beethoven, and further back even Bach and Mozart, I suppose you could regard as cathedral thinkers now in a way because their music's still as popular as ever. Yeah. Although at the time they probably didn't regard themselves as such.
Yep.
Yeah.
On infinitude, region of the stars, you talk about distant, far away, we cannot reach it. Where would you like to go in space, if it was possible?
Wow. Yeah, so this is the track that I did that was originally an improvisation with Frank Van Essen playing violin. And when I listened to it, they had a very expansive feel to it. And then I saw a photo. I've got a friend in New Zealand called Chris Pegman, who's an amazing photographer, and his speciality is these kind of time-lapse photos of the Milky Way that he takes at night. And he's won prizes for these photos. They're absolutely amazing. And I saw one of them that he took, which he let me use on the album cover or sleeve. And it's a Celtic cross, and then in the background is just the Milky Way, and it looks amazing. And I've always been interested in astronomy. Like most people growing up in the late 60s, I wanted to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
or a train driver, but ended up being a musician. But I've always loved programs on science and space and just how vast everything is, and the idea that you can look at stars and be looking back into history millions of years ago, because what you see is something that happened so long ago,
long before you were
here. Yeah, that really gives an amazing perspective, I think, on life and creation. yeah, I'd love to go into space and explore distant galaxies. I mean, that would be incredible if that was.
Is there a planet you would choose first, or anywhere will be good?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, I've just been watching a series on the BBC called The Planets, and it goes through each planet and how they were formed and the characteristics and that. Most of them are, well, they're all, apart from Earth, are pretty uninhabitable at the moment, but somewhere like one of Saturn's moons might be pretty interesting because they've discovered ice there, so there are the building blocks of life. So it'll be interesting to see that from the comfort of a spaceship.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think I know the inspiration behind Fells Point now after you talked to me at the beginning or before we did the recording. But do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah. So yeah, as the album kind of came together thematically, it seemed to be taking people on the journey of the separation of the people who wanted to be together, to the eventual journey across the ocean, to the homecoming, which I call Fells Point. So Fells Point is a very positive, uplifting kind of tune, kind of based on, but not really, kind of a jig type feel. And Fells Point is a historical area in the city that my wife lives in, and that I've kind of adopted as my second home, Baltimore. And when I saw this area, it's an area down by the docks, by the sea, and there are these cobbled streets and quite old buildings, probably from the 18th century, so quite old in American standards. And when I first went there, I was amazed because it reminded me a lot of an English town called Deal, in which there are also these cobbled streets and old buildings. And it also used to be a kind of maritime town. And I spent a few weeks there when I was recording the Straub's album, The Ferryman's Curse, in 2017. So it was quite weird to suddenly be in America, but also be in a district that looked like somewhere that could have easily been the southeast of England. So it did feel like kind of a homecoming type place.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to have the album end on a sense of optimism and hope, because I think no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, there always is something to be hopeful about, whether it's in this life or eventually in the next life. There's always hope, and that's something I feel all my music maybe carries.
That answers another question. So it sounds like you are well, you're definitely touring right now, but do you plan to tour to the far away, or are you including some of those songs?
So yeah, at the moment I'm touring with Life Signs, which is a band, four-piece band I'm part of, which is John Young, who's an amazing keyboard player and writer and singer, his brainchild. So I've not been in the band since the beginning, but I've been playing with them for the last 4 years or so. So we're on that tour. We play music from the 3 Life Signs albums, and we're playing the whole of the album Altitude, which came out. It was similarly, in fact, it was recorded in parallel with my album during the pandemic lockdown. So yeah, we're just playing exclusively Life Signs music, but I'd absolutely love to play to the Far Away live. It's going to take some organizing, and I'll need to get a visa as well to tour it in America, because my visa recently expired. So that's one.
Great to see you,
yeah. But I think if I toured it, I definitely want to have an Irish pipe player, Troy ideally, But I know another great player, if not, because the pipes and the whistles are definitely part of this music. So yeah, I'm certainly hopeful that we can do that. I mean, I do duo gigs with Sally, and we're going to be playing one or two tunes from the album, but because the music's so multi-layered and complex, it's really hard to do too much of it in the duo format.
All right, what's next for you? Because I know somebody of your caliber, there's always something brewing.
Yeah, well, it turned out that the last year was kind of one of the busiest years ever, because it gave me time just to focus on various projects like the 17 CD Iona box set, Book of Iona, that I put together, along with various other recordings, because musicians obviously and writers, when they're faced with something like a major kind of thing like a pandemic, tend to go into writing and recording mode. So lots of people were asking me to play on albums, and one of the albums, well, two albums, Altitude, I think, is a great album, the Life Signs album, and DBA's Halcyon Hymns, which I played on, is another great album that came out of last year and released earlier this year. So yeah, currently I'm also recording tracks for Chris Braid from DBA for a new album. Not sure whether it's going to be a solo Chris Braid album or the DBA album, but the songs are really great. I'm playing mainly guitar on those, little bits of keyboard. And I'm doing some playing on a new album by Nick Fletcher, who's the guitarist in Steve Hackett's brother John Hackett's band.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of fusion album. So that's more doing some kind of jazzy fusion soloing on keyboards. What else? Well, on the horizon also is going to be another Iona box set, but this time including all the live albums we did, plus lots of previously unreleased live recordings. So I'm hoping to put that together sometime next year. But yeah, over the next few months, definitely kind of promoting To the Far Away and getting word out about that. And then actually next Saturday, I'll be traveling back over to the USA, to Baltimore, to be reunited with my wife. She's been over there while I've been on tour here with Life Signs. So that'll be another joyous reunion.
Good. Is there anything else that you would like to mention that we have not covered today?
Well, the To the Far Away is actually, yes. One of the things as I mentioned, I was doing during the lockdown, walking on my lane every day. I was taking loads of photos of the landscape and the changing seasons, because basically, when lockdown happened in England, it was the beginning of March, or second week of March, I think. So from then up until the end of October, when I finally made it over to America via 2 weeks in Mexico, which is another story, I was taking photos. So kind of the photos document the changing landscape through all 4 seasons. And I've always been a keen photographer. So what I really wanted to do is, the photos were very much part of the whole story of the album, was to have a limited edition version, which includes a hardback book of photographs. So we've released, as well as there's download versions and just the single CD version. There's also a double disc version with lots of bonus tracks, some of which are newly recorded. And there's also this box set version of To the Far Away, which has the photo book. So I'm hugely excited about that. Actually getting some photos printed in a book. So that was an ambition as well. So that's only a very limited edition. I think we had We had 100 copies made, and I think probably about 80 are already accounted for.
Wow.
So if you want to get that, you'll have to hurry, because I'm not sure whether we'll be making more of those, because it's an expensive item to make. Oh, hello.
Okay,
Yeah.
time to go.
Okay, we're almost done.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, have to go now. All my life science buddies are raring to eat on this day off.
Well, definitely. I just want to, actually, we're coming in close. Thank you very much, Dave Bainbridge, for taking the time out to answer these questions from Progressive Rock Central. Good luck in all that you pursue, and have a Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday season. We thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, great to chat with you, and thanks again for the great review of the album. Much appreciated.
All right, you take care. Have a good dinner, and
Okay.
thanks again. Really.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Take care.